Well, good morning and welcome to Will My PPP Loan Be Forgiven? We're green today here in most of Western Pennsylvania. For those of you that are joining us from California and from everywhere else in Texas, our area of the state went into green phase, which means we have a few more liberties, less restrictions. So we're red, white, blue, and green today. So my name is Brian Schill, and I'm the Executive Director for the Peters Township Chamber. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Just a little bit about the Chamber. We're a 501c6 membership-based nonprofit. Our funding primarily is composed of each member's annual investment and events and sponsorships. Our mission is to provide connections, opportunities, partnerships, and resources to grow our businesses and serve our communities. Quite simply, we promote, advocate, connect, and of course, as today, educate. In addition to Peters Township, our area of coverage also includes the South Hills and Northern Washington County. Joining us again for week 5 is Mr. Glenn Main. He's the managing partner of the Main Point Group. Former CPA, longtime chamber member, and lives here in McMurray. His family owns multiple businesses. He's a consultant to business owners all over the U.S. So some of you, most of you have been with us before, but just as a reminder, why are we doing these? We continuously receive questions regarding PPP, and the guidance, as probably most of you know, changes almost daily. There's always something new and exciting. Well, okay, new anyway. But anyway, so we turned a little over a month ago to national expert Glenn Main, and here we are today with part 5. So our goals, again, as usual, we'll do a little bit of a review, a little bit of an update, and then we'll finish up with some Q&A, which brings us to you in your part. We'll Zoom 101. We have everyone muted, and if you'd please remain so during the entire update, that will eliminate our background noise. This is being recorded and will be available on our website. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the chat feature, and it's located at the bottom of your screen. And with that, take it away, Glenn, for number 5 update.
All righty. Thank you very much. Lots of interesting things going on. You probably all are aware that the United States Senate passed, let's get the bill number here, H.R. 7010. So that's the House number, right, Matt? The House of Representatives actually passed this bill last week, I think Thursday, something like that, and it was 417 to 1, which is shocking because, you know, if you follow any kind of news media, you know that the House can't agree on what time it is today, right? And so they're fighting all the time. So 417 to 1 is incredible. The 1 is a guy from Kentucky that just doesn't agree with anything. So that's okay. So then it went to the Senate, and everybody was asking me about every day, did the Senate pass it? Did the Senate pass it, right? And the answer is, yep, the Senate passed it. So now we have the expectation that this bill will be going to the president's desk and that he'll sign it, likely sign it, right? So what we want to do today is jump right into this thing. You guys all know what's going on. You've got your loans, or started your loans, you're spending your money, you're trying to follow the rules, and everything's now been changed. Again, it's like a weekly, you get tired of us saying, you know, same song, second verse, 14th verse. And so I'm glad I have Matt and Steve on today because we really need their commentary, right? And input. So Steve, we decided after last week, and everybody really enjoyed the bullet points that he made. He's our new Barney Fife of the show, right? He's got one bullet, but he puts his little list together. And I appreciate Steve a lot because he's been so insightful. He can see things here. He reads between the lines, if you will. And I think that's really, really good. So Steve and I both have relationships in the broader world that this industry, Steve has a particular connection with the SBA, so he has the ability to sort of get a jump start on information, which is really helpful. I have a lot of relationships with the very few concentrated tax attorneys and CPAs around the United States, generally not Pennsylvania, they're Florida, California, Illinois, and so forth. And so they're, when a bill comes out, they read it that night and then digest it and have a webinar or something the next day. It's amazing how they do that. But so I was driving back home from a round trip around the state and into Maryland. And last night I listened to tax attorneys and CPAs explain this thing and tried not to go to sleep at the wheel. So we're going to talk about this today. I want Steve to jump in pretty quick with his bullet list, but before I do that, one of the things I've been saying is everybody on the call can read. So I'm sure your CPA firm, your bank, your whoever you get email from, your associations are sending things out and saying, oh, golly day, do a happy dance because the Senate has passed this bill. It's a fix to fix all the problems in the world, including the rioting, and it's gonna make life easier for you as a PPP borrower. That's sort of the advertisement. Now, you guys are smart. You've seen this movie before, right? You know that that's possibly not true. Well, there's a lot of issues in this thing that need your attention because it isn't as advertised. Let me just say it that way. Can it help you? Possibly. Can it hurt you? Absolutely. So just be careful because we've been trying to communicate that way with plain talk. Let me read something for you. This is from the tax attorneys that I referenced, and it says, kudos to Congress on passing a bipartisan logical bill that will allow, keyword, for a great many borrowers to survive and spend monies that may allow for forgiveness in a manner that is best for employees, struggling businesses, and our economy. Here's the catchphrase. There will be a cost, however. The SBA will receive far less in repayments on PPP loans. So the federal deficit will be hundreds of billions of dollars larger, contributing to pressure to raise income taxes and reduce the federal state tax exemption after the elections in order to have semblance of fiscal balance for our nation's future. I agree with everything they said. So it is possible if you have guidance and you have professional help, because I think it's just even more and more obvious that's going to need to happen. And I would say informed professional help. So if you have an advisor, accountant, whoever that you go to, ask them this question first. Tell me what you have been doing to stay on top of and understand this law, because I'm seeing a lot of erroneous advice. I'm seeing and hearing a lot of, we guess this, we think this. That's not good enough. That's not good enough, because at the end of the day, it's your loan, your money. If they're guessing, if they're doing it on the back of a napkin, that's problematic. I can just tell you. Steve can comment and Matt can comment in a minute, but I believe that this is even going to be harder than we've already seen it to be. And it's just another distraction, another headache, but it could be better if you know how to navigate. So that's enough of that. Let's go to the Steve, who's going to talk about his bullet points. And Matt, if you have a thought or want to chime in, I think that's wonderful. You're muted, by the way, Matt. So you might want to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, that's just so that the calls on the phone don't come through.
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't want to tie you up. Okay, Steve, go ahead, Barney. Steve.
All right, perfect. So here are what I felt are some of the top 5 developments over the past week. First of all, it has now come out that banks must retain information on these PPP loan applications and the documentation you as a business owner submit we must retain that information for 6 years after you receive forgiveness. Why I feel that is important for you business owners is that I think as you go through the forgiveness process and you determine what you should be forgiven on, what you shouldn't be forgiven on, just know that at some point, I think it would be somewhat of a big trigger, like if you had an IRS audit or something like that sometime in the next 6 to 8 years, somebody could knock on your door or send you a letter and say, hey, we're going to audit your PPP loan. And you need to be prepared for that. So I think that was something that I think as a business owner, you definitely need to be aware of. The second big development that I saw this week, and it had to do with the bill that was passed by the Senate that Glenn alluded to, was that if the part of your loan that is not forgiven, the time period to pay that back was extended from 2 years to now 5 years. So I think that will give those that don't have their loan forgiven, some flexibility on the payback. But also, I will add that something that really hasn't come out in mass is that the period that you have where you don't have to pay the loan back. In most of the loans, if you were given 6 months with no principal and no interest payments. From what I have read and been told is that was extended from 6 months to 10 months. So that is something also that as you go through the forgiveness process, there's a good possibility that your loan, if it's totally forgiven, that you won't have to make any payments now. Whereas we had talked about a couple weeks ago, there was kind of a gray area that you might have had to start making payments for a month or two. Now, tying in with that, my third bullet point is that the forgiveness, the amount of money that you have to spend on payroll was 75%. Now it's been reduced to 60%, which is great. But what you have to be a little bit wary of is that if you do not spend at least 60% of your loan amount on payroll, then your loan in general your total loan will not be forgiven. So just to give you a quick example on this, if you borrowed $100,000 and you paid out, $65,000 in salaries and another $35,000 in rent or utilities, you'll be fine. Your loan will be, forgiven. But on the flip side, if you borrowed $100,000 and you only spent $50,000 on payroll, then nothing of your loan will be forgiven. So you will have a $100,000 loan that you'll have to pay back over 5 years at 1%. This differs because I know we had this question a couple times in the past couple weeks where we had said, well, hey, it all depends upon how much you use. So if you borrowed 100,000 and you used 80,000 and 75% of the 80,000 was used toward payroll, you'd be okay. Well, that's all at this point right out the window. Definitely the 60% of using your payroll is based off of based off your loan amount at this point. So that was the third big change. The fourth big change, one of the things that I thought was left out of the Senate and House bill that was a little bit surprising to me is that they did not allow business owners to use their PPP money for PPE, protective equipment. Many businesses out there have to buy now protective equipment, hand sanitizer, plexiglass, that type of stuff. And that was not included in this bill. So I thought that was somewhat of a surprising development. And then fifth and finally, and this might be breaking news for just about everybody on the call, I had an extensive conversation with all my SBA contacts yesterday, and they are 95% sure that the forgiveness application that many of you have received will no longer be used. So I know we had this question over the weeks, the last 2 weeks, and I think the advice that we gave was look at it, but don't fill it out. And that recommendation was a good one. So, because certainly and Matt, you can certainly maybe talk about this a little bit, is that, once the president actually signs the bill, then it's got to go to the SBA for interpretation. And then, once the SBA, then the SBA will follow up with, a new forgiveness application and some guidance for us. But those were the 5 big developments of the week.
Wow, that's really great. That's really helpful. I enjoyed that. Matt, do you have any thoughts, or I'm sure you've maybe not following it as closely. Matt's a newlywed as of this past weekend, so we were all excited for him, and that's why he's smiling a little bit broader today, which is really wonderful. Has a beautiful new wife, and that's a good thing. So plus it's green, right, Matt? So you can be in the office.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I get to be in the office after the wedding now, so that's great. Beautiful day here, but that's all right. Glad to be in the green phase. Yeah, I mean, just what Steve was saying, that after it gets signed by the president, the SBA, but also the Treasury will weigh in. So those 2 departments will publish additional guidance, FAQs and regulations, depending on how they will be going about that process. So that's the next step after the president signs it.
That's great. Like I said, the last couple of times, it's really helpful to have people of Matt's level on the call. And Brian, we appreciate you engaging our leaders, right? Because this is a big deal. And, Matt's been on every call, which is fantastic, because then he can, report back up through to Guy Reschenthaler's office. And I wanted to tell everybody, I've been pounding the table pretty hard on this whole thing. And I spent an hour on the phone with the chief of staff for the Western region for Senator Toomey's office. Pat Toomey is our United States Senator. And it was a very, very frank conversation. And I told him the kind of stuff that we're struggling with and experiencing as small business owners. So, we're trying. It's hard because there's a lot of stuff going on out there, and then these riots are not helping anything. But, we're fighting for you guys because we're all in it together, kind of thing. I think it's probably better at this point to do some questions and just jump into it, because you guys are not stupid. Some of the implications of stuff we're talking about. We'll be able to weave into the questions some of the concerns that we have, and some of the, it's not that it can't help you. It's just that it's another layer of things to think about and to talk to the professionals about, because again, you want to be careful, because the public advertising of this as the fix-it comes along with other strings, and that's where the gotchas are. So just be careful about that part. Don't go to sleep because you think, oh, now I have 24 weeks. I used to have 8 weeks. I have to worry about it. That's what people do, because we're all human nature, right? We have other things to do, like keeping our business going. So it happened with the tax season, right? Taxes are due, personal taxes are due April 15th. It was extended to July 15th. And everybody said, well, okay, push the file back. That's what I did, and don't have to worry about it. So that's what people are going to do with PPP, because there's 4.4 million of us that got those things. And we would advise you not to do that. You really need to get this done and get it out of your hair, because it's going to get worse, particularly when the crowd starts to head for the door all at the same time. So let's do a couple questions. Brian, do you want to do your excellent Master of Ceremonies act?
Sounds good. our first question is our favorite, the BUU4.
Yeah.
Is the under $2 million, is the under $2 million will not be audited still in place?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And Matt, maybe you can help me on this one. But yes, it is true that Secretary Mnuchin jumped all over these big companies who scooped in and took the money. You guys remember all that really weren't supposed to. That's not what this was for. So they basically shamed them publicly. And a lot of them had this wonderful change of heart and decided to basically give the money back through May 18th, I believe it was, Steve. I can't remember. I think it was May 18th.
May 18th, yeah.
Yeah. So you could exempt yourself from the whole mess, never have an audit, never have a problem if you just gave the money back. Or if you carried it over, which a lot of people have done. I'm actually going to be in, believe it or not, Las Vegas. I'm flying on a plane. That'll be interesting. Week after next week, meeting with a whole group of people who have loans over 2 million, and they're all very concerned, which they should be. So we'll talk about that. But anyway, under 2 million, you will be exempted from an automatic audit. However, I think we've said this before and we would emphasize it again. That does not exempt you from a rash of problems because it's an SBA rule that you're not audited by the SBA. It doesn't exempt you from the whistleblower issue, right? That's still firmly in place. So if you have a disgruntled employee, if you have somebody who just looked you up and said, boy, that looks like a business we could go after, they're protected by law. Their anonymity is protected. They cannot be revealed under criminal penalty. And they get 25% of the reward of anything that's collected. So there's a disincentive to rat people out. And unfortunately, one of the things that upsets me in this environment, I mean, again, we probably talked about this before, but you know, our state, one of the founding states in the colonies, the freedom, you know, fighters, has a form on the state of Pennsylvania website that you can rat out your neighbor for not doing what you think they should do for protection and so forth. I don't think that's good. So that's in there. There's just a lot of things like that that concern me. So yes, it's protected. You're not going to be audited, but you might have an audit anyway. So just be really on your toes.
Yeah, and Glenn, just to kind of add in there, I mean, I think this is where, you know, if we're, you know, right. So if somebody has like a $5,000 PPP loan or a $15,000 PPP loan, you know, to me, the likelihood of you know, that loan getting audited is probably slim to none.
Correct.
But on the flip side, I think that if for some reason the IRS or the state government, you know, did some kind of audit on your business, and you know, it came out that you had a PPP loan, this is where I think that you know, they could then audit your PPP loan, even if you were under 2 million. I think it would take some kind of event like that.
Yeah.
You know, because the banks have certainly been directed that, you know, if we make a PPP loan and we shouldn't have, they have a clawback provision. They can, whatever fee we got paid on that loan, they can come take it. And that was for any size loan. So you know, I do think that there is some kind of, you know, speaking out of both sides of their mouth here going on a little bit.
Yep. So Brian, you want to hit the next one?
You bet. Are we still able to use 100% on payroll?
Yes, absolutely. That's the best route for sure, because it's the payroll protection program. That's the goal. That's the design. Senator Toomey's office reminded me of that yesterday. I said, absolutely, absolutely. That's what the business owners want to do. Just let them do that. Don't cause headache. Just let them pay it for what they're trying to pay it for. And he agreed because it's a Republican senator. So they feel like our governor is preventing people from spending the money on payroll, and that drives them crazy. But yes, plan on 100%. Okay.
Okay, our next question. Has the period of time to spend the loan proceeds on payroll been extended from 8 weeks to 24 weeks?
Kind of. What it says is that you have an election to make, which is different than everybody being extended. Okay. So you guys know what the problem is, right? Some businesses can spend the money on eligible expenses like payroll and be done in 8 weeks because that's their situation. Some businesses are having record years. I talked to a man in Tawnytown, Maryland, small little town. He's had a pizza shop for 32 years. There's no dine-in option. It's all takeout. His business is up 32%. No problem. His sister has a high-end restaurant on the Chesapeake Shore where people in Maryland go for the weekends and vacation. She's dying because you can't convert to takeout like that for a high-end restaurant. So she's in trouble. She can't use the money. So the 24-week option says if you need more time, you can elect 24 weeks. If I can for just a second, and Steve or Matt, if you want to comment on this too, the advice that we're hearing, the top folks that we're talking to are saying, if you can qualify for forgiveness in 8 weeks, do 8 weeks. Absolutely get this out of your hair.
Yeah.
You get it off your balance sheet. If you have to file for more money from Steve or whoever your banker is, you're going to be able to eliminate the loan from your financial statement. You're on your way. Okay. You'll avoid the mad rush later when all the people who needed to take more time, who dilly-dallied around, are trying to rush it all in. And so your chances for processing will be better because, remember, the banks and the SBA have up to 5 months to approve this thing. So just because you got through your 8 weeks doesn't mean you're forgiven. It just means you start the forgiveness process. So it's still on your financial statements. It's still in the back of your mind, right? So one top tax attorney said, do it for your mental health. And I agree with them. Steve, do you have a thought, or Matt?
Glenn, I think you're right on. I think that if for those businesses that, are able to use all the use their loan for payroll, through 8 weeks, get it done now, before, before more changes potentially occur that, that are, I don't want to say harmful, but that more changes occur that create more confusion. But yeah, if you can get it done now, get it done in the 8 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Katrina's got a good one. You want to take that, Brian?
Sure. Well, the forgiveness form will change. Are the time periods to compare full-time equivalents to either February to June of 19 or January to February of 2020 still the policy? This way we know our target for evaluation of restoring our full-time equivalents.
I love that question, and we don't know the answer. It's one of those same problems we've talked about before where Steve and I were visiting for a long time this morning about it in preparation here. And one of the things we think happens, Matt, I'd be curious as to your thought, because if you understand the process, isn't there a saying, if you saw how laws are made, it's like sausage or something being made, it's really scary and gross. But what's happening is this is a backward, it's bad the normal way. This is really bad because stuff was shoved in through the pipeline. And then the bureaucratic entities, the government systems that managed through all this had to come back in behind the bill making, the sausage making, and fix everything. And it's not Senator Toomey. It's not Senator Casey. Hate to tell you this. It's not President Trump. It's not those people who are on television that actually write these laws. They have staffs of attorneys, right? They write the law, and it's supposed to be something that the politicians intended. But there's the problem, right? It gets put into legalese because laws are laws. And there's all these issues, and the lawyers, the staff people that are writing the laws are not business people. They're not running a business. They work for Congress people. So that's where these issues are. So we don't know that answer, but wouldn't it be nice to know? Katrina has a good point. How do you plan full-time equivalency if you don't even know what the period is? Do you have a thought, Matt? I mean, how do you? I don't know anything to do but wait. Do you, Matt? As hard as that is to say.
Yeah, that's probably best. I mean, questions like this, I always like to take to the boss.
Excellent.
In case he has any more answers for that as well. Because I always make a list of the things that I need to ask him. So this is good to have on here.
Yeah, offline, Matt, I've got an extensive document that I'm going to send to you that outlines all these issues in great detail. You don't read them over lunch because you'll throw up in the bathroom, but there are things that you can talk to Reschenthaler. I'm sending it to Matt Blackburn too at Toomey's office. Really good question.
Yeah, I will. Let me add one thing is that as part of the Senate, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this because it is confusing and there are some questions that we really can't answer as of yet. But as part of the bill that was passed, in the past bills, if you couldn't bring back your if you had 10 employees and you could only bring back 5, you were definitely hurting your forgiveness. You were basically cutting it in half. With the House bill that was passed, the House and Senate bill that was passed, that was changed. That you could still now get forgiveness, even though your employees cannot come back, that all your employees might not be able to come back initially. Although you have now until December 31st to bring back all your employees. So again, it gets a little bit gray and we don't have all the facts. So, hopefully maybe with some guidance, we'll be able to answer Katrina's question a little better.
Yeah. Okay, Brian.
All right, our next question is from our BUU4 Pamela. Is there a distinction between an SBA audit and an IRS audit?
Absolutely. It's kind of the difference between a root canal and a heart attack, I think. Both bad, both painful, both something to be avoided at all costs. The thing I would say, this is interesting because the SBA is not, well, you know the SBA, Steve, better than me. I know the IRS better than you because of my background, but the IRS is something that people fear, right? Because they have enforcement, very public enforcement capabilities. So it keeps the troops in line. We have a voluntary, believe it or not, it's called a voluntary income tax system. The compliance rate in the United States versus around the world is very, very high. Italy's compliance rate is horrible. They have something called the mafia. Russia's high, compliance rate is horrible. Most countries, they cheat the system. In the United States, people generally don't. They don't. And the IRS enforces that, application through audits. SBA doesn't do it that way. They just don't have the same scope. They don't get tax returns and stuff. They don't have loans with everybody. So this has overwhelmed the SBA and their capability to do audits. And it's widely publicized that what the SBA has done is they've said, okay, we're going to take the top ones over 2 million, and we're going to use statistical analysis and whistleblowers, people like that, to rat out and figure out where the other abuses are. So that's how they're going to audit. Now they may refer to the IRS. I wouldn't be surprised about that for 1 minute. What do you think, Matt? What's your sense for that? I think we lost Matt. That's okay. Steve, what do you think?
Let me jump in real quick. So historically, the SBA has never done, the SBA does not do what I would call an audit ever. This program is really the first time that somebody said, hey, look, SBA, we're going to have you, audit loans. So I think for the SBA, it's somewhat of a new process. Now, historically, the SBA has always, reviewed, especially when it comes to guarantees, they've to the 7A guarantees that banks do, where the SBA has reviewed bank files and said, hey, you didn't do this guarantee right. You needed to do this and do that. So there's always been a back and forth between the SBA and the banks in regards to reviewing SBA files. But the SBA has never really done what I would consider like an audit on a company directly. I think that's new ground for them.
Yeah. Kim's got a great question that's coming up a lot with people. Brian, you want to handle that for us?
You bet. We had an employee quit. Do we still need to hire someone to be considered for forgiveness by June 30th, or is that extended with this new bill? Also, if we cannot hire someone by the deadline, does this mean we can't be forgiven, even with documentation stating we have tried to hire?
Yeah, this is so good, isn't it? And the longer we go, the harder this is going to be, right? We're going to have more complexity and questions. And, you take something from 8 weeks to potentially 24 weeks. You give things more time. We have riots. We have COVID still around. You're going to have issues. One of the folks on the call, I happen to know because we've talked about it, and I owe you a call back about it. I'm not going to identify the person's name. Had somebody die, one of their employees. What do you do with that? The business didn't cause it. It's sad, but they're gone. So the basic way to think about this is there's a requirement that's very important, and that is to maintain your FTE, full-time equivalency. And the wrinkle here that's complicated is you have to do that on a payroll by payroll basis. So if you pay payroll every week you have to test this, which is very difficult because it's the average of every payroll. So if one payroll goes down and the other payrolls stay high, it could foul with your calculations. So obviously, this is a software-driven decision. Remember I said, check with the accountant, check with your advisor, make sure they understand this, because you can spend the money. You can spend all of your money and still not have forgiveness. You can spend all your 60% and not have forgiveness. You can spend 100% and not have full forgiveness. That's, to me, going to be the biggest problem, because we're going to have companies that did what they thought was right and indeed kept people in place. And because of this crazy way that the FTE works, they're going to get stuck paying back money they don't have anymore. And that's going to be really, really bad. Steve can back me up on this, but we're hearing, I've been saying it for a while without knowing statistics to be true, but just anecdotal evidence. CPA firms and things are calculating this for clients as an estimate, and they were coming up 20 to 25% short on forgiveness. So that means if you have a $100,000 PPP loan and you go to turn it in, you're only going to get forgiveness for $80,000. I have a client who has a $2.2 million PPP loan. that means he could be at risk for $440,000 to pay back. He couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. So the FTE is critical. To your question, Kim, just chat, contact me offline, because there are remedies, but they're so complicated. There's exceptions to the exceptions to the exceptions, and it'll bore everybody to tears. But if this is an issue for you, just contact me and I'll walk you through it. But it's complicated, unfortunately. Okay.
Just
All right.
just to add a quick 2 cents. I mean, what makes this question so interesting is that, Kim might have spent all the money on payroll, but if she lost, let's say, 2 or 3 employees, she might be better electing for the 24-week period so that she could at least hire 3 people back so that her forgiveness wouldn't be compromised or reduced. So, and again, this is where, all the formulas the SBA has put out there originally are now going to change. So, this is where Kim might have to run a couple different scenarios to figure out if she should submit her forgiveness application now or wait a couple more months. All right. I mean, this is what makes this whole thing so crazy.
Well, and the further problem, and we were talking last night on my drive back home with the tax attorneys, and they said, think about it this way. If you think that 24 weeks is automatically better because it's longer to spend the money, you only have enough money for 10 weeks, right? You have to meet the FTE test for the whole period, which is kind of another question in there I'm seeing. So guess what? If you run out of PPP money and you still have to maintain the test, guess who pays for that? Now you pay for employees that you really don't need or want to hold up your FTE. If you see what I'm saying, this could get really bad. So you've got one of those paradoxes, right? You've got a situation potentially. So that's why they were urging everybody who has the ability to get rid of this thing in 8 weeks to get rid of it. It's not looking good to necessarily take 24 weeks. There are situations where that's going to make complete sense, but it is not an automatic, 24 weeks is better than 8. Not at all. Matt, are you hearing what we're saying? This is a huge potential problem. They tried to fix it. Good job. I think they've created another complexity for people. Do you see that, Matt?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something I'm making note of too. There's been a lot of layers to this, and there's unforeseen issues that you go back and change, and then it creates new issues, and then you got to go change so this is just, I guess, all part of the process, but definitely make a note of that.
Yeah, another one you can take back to Reschenthaler is, we were talking about this cliff problem. We went from 75% that wasn't a cliff, right? So you could spend less as long as 75% was on payroll, right? So if you got a $100,000 PPP loan and you only spent $50,000, as long as 75% or 37.5 was for payroll, you could qualify for $50,000. Now that's not true. If you don't spend the 60% on payroll, you have no forgiveness for anything. Nothing. The whole loan, you could spend the money and the whole loan is not forgivable. That's a disaster. It's so bad that Marco Rubio, who's been the leader kind of in this, is tweeting his disagreement with it. So unless his tweets become automatic law, who knows? That's not good though. Matt, that's a problem. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. You want to
Right.
do another one, Brian? We're doing good.
Here we go. Katrina again. 24 weeks will be before December 31st. So if we do not complete the process in 8 weeks and choose 24 weeks, will our FTE be compared to end of the 24 weeks or hold off until December 31st, which will be after the 24-week period?
I know what you're asking. I'm not positive I know the answer. I think it's at the end of the 24 weeks, but if you'll contact me offline, I'll verify that for you. Okay. That's fair. I just don't know. I'm not going to tell you something I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay. Next question. If using 100% for payroll and need 12 weeks to do that instead of 24, is that workable?
I don't know. Steve, do you know that? I don't know that answer.
No, I think that's a great question. I actually talked to a tax guy myself yesterday, and we had this very conversation. And I think this is one of these things we have to wait for a little guidance from the SBA. Is it 8 weeks or 24 weeks, or is it, you can do stuff to this question is a great point. If you end up, can you do less? Or does it have to be 8 or 24 and nothing in between? So I think that's a good question. We need to wait for a little guidance on.
Yeah. I think that the tangling here, the tension I'm sensing, I told Steve in the senator's office, and Matt, you may have heard me say this, it's turned into the PPP loan program into the PPP Hydra. If you know what Greek mythology is about, it's got all these tails and they're wrapping around, and you think you got it handled, and there comes another one. And it's this kind of entanglement, and the more they try to fix it and create another exception, it creates another complexity. Oh my gosh, I mean, this is like, holy cow. It doesn't surprise me really, because if you know anything about income tax law, and there's no reason you should, but I can tell you, having dealt with that for years, starting a CPA firm and dealing with our clients as business owners, this is exactly what happens in income tax law, in estate tax law, any tax law. It's the exceptions where you look for the answers. It's not the rule. So there's a rule, and then over time, the exceptions create how you handle things. So you read the law, and you read the 26 exceptions to the law, and that's how you plan. So that's what's going on right now. We're getting exceptions that attempt to adjust to the reality of the situation and to, handle, restaurants or hotels or something. So it's really confusing. So you want to try the next one from Ed there, I think is the next one.
You betcha. If I can use all the proceeds on 100% payroll in 12 weeks instead of 8 weeks, can I then apply for and get 100% forgiveness, or do I need to wait for the 24 weeks to apply for forgiveness?
So that's real close to Pamela's, right? It's a similar, Ed and Pamela, boy, these are great. This really is helpful, right, Matt? I mean, they're surfacing the issues that the Congress doesn't know because they're not business owners.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is really good. Really good to ask these questions. I anticipate a lot of this will come out in FAQ guidance sheets moving forward. That's kind of what happened the first time. So, enough people ask these questions, and I think that they will be able to publish an FAQ sheet with all of that. Yeah.
So we've been saying this, as long as you guys want us to do this, we're willing to do it. And, it's at this point, it's kind of interesting. We're not going to stop doing it. We have clients that we need to help, and we're willing to do it for you guys too. But I don't know why anybody wouldn't dial it in every week. It just changes every week. It changes within the week. Okay, Jennifer's got a really good question. Brian, you want to do that one?
Yes, sir. What is the tax treatment of the SBA loan forgiveness per IRS and PA state? I have read, no, this is not taxable, but also read that expenses included in forgiveness are not deductible for tax purposes. Basically, contradiction.
You are absolutely right. What the law says, the original CARES Act that created PPP. It makes it very clear that Congress wanted the loan forgiveness, the forgiven loan, to be tax-free. Because imagine this, in tax law, if you have a business loan, so if Steve McCarron or a banker loans you money for your business, not personal. Personal is a completely different situation, tax-wise. But if you get a business loan and you default on the loan, you do not pay the loan back, and it is quote unquote forgiven, right? You go bankrupt, something like that. That's taxable income because it's a business loan. So if you have $100,000 business loan and you don't pay it back and it's forgiven, you owe the tax on the 100,000. So Congress recognized that issue, and they said we don't want these loans to be taxing people because they're spending the money to help people out, employees out. That was clear. The IRS stepped in a month ago because I thought they were jealous of the SBA for getting all the attention, and they said we can't change that, but we're going to issue a notice, not a law, a notice that says we're going to get back at you. We're going to deny the deductibility of the expenses that you use the tax-free money for. And everybody was up in arms. Everybody went nuts, because can you imagine if you got a $2 or $3 or $4 million loan and all of a sudden none of that's deductible? That's not right. That's not what the tax law says. If you spend money from wherever you got it, what if you got the money from an inheritance? That's not taxable. What's the difference, right? So it's already going to court. It could take 2 to 3 to 4 years in court to determine which way that wind blows. So we don't know. It is a total contradiction. We also don't know how Pennsylvania is going to handle it, because Pennsylvania hasn't said anything, because they're busy keeping everybody in house arrest, I guess. Sorry. Okay. Pamela?
All right, we have a comment here. I think it's really nice. It says, yes, please keep on doing this. You are all amazing. How about that?
She could have said handsome. She could have said handsome. Well, she would be thinking about you, Brian.
Yeah, right. Okay, here's our probably oh geez, our last question. I know someone who did not apply, may be smart if he can survive, but are banks still taking and processing PPP applications?
Steve?
Yes. Yes, banks are still accepting applications. In fact, banks can still accept applications, as far as I can tell, through June 30th. So the clock is ticking a little bit. What I would recommend is you call your local bank and see if they are still willing to take your applications. There are some banks that, due to volume, have stopped taking applications. So call your local bank, ask if they're still taking applications. If they say no, maybe try another one. But technically, banks are allowed to still take applications up until June 30th.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, I just helped a small business owner as a favor to file their PPP loan application, sent it in to Steve last week, and he's very kindly is working through it for the business owner. So that's great. By the way, I mean, we're trying to keep it a little light when we can find the opportunity, because it's so tough doing this for everybody, all of you. Nobody on this call is making any money, right? We're not charging. We don't want to charge. Nobody's getting paid. This isn't our day jobs. Thankfully we're doing good. We're doing well. We are thankful for that. We realize that this is very difficult. And as we've said before, if you have to go hire people to talk about what we're talking about, I can tell you the billing rates. It's $595 an hour for the tax attorney I talked to, $375 for his associate, $225 an hour for the basically college kids that help them out. And you could easily be spending over $1,000 an hour for advice. So what Brian and Kelly are doing for you is unbelievable. It really, the Chamber is a wonderful organization and a good convener, because everybody else is doing it for a business. This isn't a business. This is a form of a charitable organization, right? For business owners. So I just can't imagine a business owner not being a part of the Chamber and not dialing in. There's no way you can't get your money back. I mean, and we just really appreciate it for everybody asking these questions and everything, because I have been using it to beat over the head of Senator Jimmy's office and everything to say, you don't know what these people are experiencing. They're not stupid. They're asking excellent, excellent questions, but what you're doing is making life harder for them. So please stop. Please let the business owners work their businesses and stay out of their hair, and just help them get these things forgiven and move on with their life, because they didn't cause the thing in the first place, right? So in case you can't sense how I feel, Matt, not at you, but the legislatures these guys need to get their act together and stop. It feels like they're punishing the business owner, to be perfectly frank.
I understand. Yeah.
All righty.
All right.
Sounds great. This is the end of our time. So thanks, Glenn, Steve, and Matt. We really appreciate having you guys on board. Just remember, if you have any questions or concerns, you have lots of options out there. We have some small business development centers. We have, of course, we have Glenn and Steve and Matt with us every week. We appreciate it. But, think about today's message, and then maybe come back next week for the update and ask some questions, and let's get it out so everybody can see it. So our next update is scheduled for next Friday, January 12th at 10 a.m. Feel free to invite others that you think might be interested. Just to let you know that the Chamber is open for business. We're always open. However, the physical office is still closed to the public. If you need to get in touch with us, email is best. You can always give us a call. Even though we're closed to the public, we are now in the office, generally speaking. But our email address is info@ptcoc.org. And our phone number is 724-941-6345. And you can also check out our Facebook page to see what's happening. As I mentioned, we do have the recordings of these webinars, and they're available on our website, which is ptcoc.org. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. If you're not a member of the Chamber, we'd love to have you aboard. Just shoot us an email or give us a call. Thanks again, Glenn and Steve and Matt, and for all of you for joining us today. We'll see you next week, and have a great day. Thank you.